What if I told you that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho were all inspired by the real life of one man? This friendly-looking, unassuming man named Ed Gein. Would you have some questions? No. How could one man inspire so much on-screen horror? There's an expression that I'm sure you're familiar with. Don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, well, be careful, because that shit can get you killed. If you judged Ed Gein by his looks, you would assume he was the inspiration for characters like Sling Blade's Carl Childers.
It ain't got no gas in it.
And Lenny Small from Of Mice and Men.
Them rabbits with no trouble.
He's the last guy you would think would go on to earn the nicknames the Plainfield Ghoul, the Plainfield Butcher, or my favorite, the Grandfather of Gore. But before we get into breaking down the Grandfather of Gore, if you're new here, welcome to Breakfast Cereal. This is a true crime channel like none other. If you like this video, you should definitely subscribe. I drop new videos all the time. I've also done a few other movie reviews now, one on a Bundy film, one on a Gacy film, and then a bunch of other Dahmer films. So I'll link them up here in a playlist so you can check them out if you want, okay? Anyway, let's get to know Ed, shall we? Here's the thing. Old Eddie isn't a serial killer. He's often bunched into that group with your Dahmers and Gacys, your Bundys, etc., but he's just not. He only killed 2 people, and that doesn't qualify you as serial. What Gein is most famous for is his middle-of-the-night trips to the local cemetery with a shovel. When Gein's farmhouse was raided after police linked him to the disappearance of Bernice, they were not prepared for what they would find. Now, this list I'm about to show, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. You can pause the video if you want to read all the disturbing details. Remember, I said Gein wasn't a serial killer, so most of the body parts found lying around his place were accrued through grave robbing. The case was national news. The modern world hadn't seen anything quite like it. People couldn't get enough of the case, and Hollywood, as they do, took note. In the intro, I mentioned Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho. Let's start with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Directed by Tobe Hooper, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a 1974 American independent horror masterpiece. The plot follows a group of friends who fall victim to a family of deranged cannibals while on their way to visit an old homestead, full of blood, guts, cannibals, and young people getting their faces cut off. Somehow, Hooper thought he could convince the Picture Association to give it a PG rating to increase viewership. But naturally, they were like, "Are you fucking insane? Have you seen your own film? There's more blood and guts in this than a Chinese wet market." The film was banned in several countries, with numerous theaters refusing to show it in response to complaints about its violence. But who gives a shit? It grossed over $30 million at the box office on a budget of just $140,000 and is widely regarded as one of the best and most influential horror films of all time.
Okay, so the idea that this film could possibly be based on a real person, and that specifically this guy is based on a real person? That's terrifying. Thankfully, Leatherface is only very loosely based on Gein. I mean, Ed's home life was dysfunctional, don't get me wrong, but last time I checked, meals around the Gein dinner table didn't look like this. Now, somewhere in the middle of that horrific list I showed you earlier were masks made from the skin of female heads and Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag. Now, this was a direct influence on the character of Leatherface, who wore a mask made of human flesh. Gein's influence is also found throughout the disturbed family's house in the film. Furniture and household items made from body parts. That was Gein's MO. Going back to that list again, we see a wastebasket made of human skin covering several chairs, skulls on his bedpost, bowls made from human skulls, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, and a lampshade made from the skin of a human face. That is one of the most fucked up things I have ever read aloud. But, I mean, that's really where the Gein influence ends with Texas Chainsaw. Coincidentally, there's a new documentary about to drop in 2025 called Dinner with Leatherface. It shines a light on the actor behind the mask, Gunnar Hansen. The guy's an icon in the horror genre, but not very well known outside of it. The trailer looks great. I'll link it in the description below for those who are interested. And speaking of dinner, anybody want some liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti?
Starring Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, and Ted Levine in unforgettable performances, The Silence of the Lambs is a 1991 psychological horror thriller directed by Jonathan Demme. This fan favorite centers around Agent Clarice Starling, a young FBI trainee hunting a serial killer named Buffalo Bill. To bring him to justice, Agent Starling seeks the advice of Hannibal Lecter, an intellectual and former forensic psychologist turned cannibalistic serial killer who coincidentally has a taste for the finest and most disgusting things in life. It was the third and most recent film to win Academy Awards in 5 major categories: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay, and was the first and only horror film to ever win Best Picture.
2 words for you. Skin suit. Not only was Gein making insane face masks out of corpses, he was also making clothing. We go on back to the worst list I've ever seen. You'll see things listed like a corset made from a female torso skin from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, and a belt made from female human nipples. Okay, so now that might be the most fucked up thing I've ever read aloud. Buffalo Bill wasn't even the main character or even really the main villain in Silence of the Lambs, and was actually based on several different serial killers like Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper. We can thank serial killer Gary Heidnik for The Pit. That was his idea. But Bill's obsession with skin and making suits out of his victims, that was all Gein. Although I don't remember any scenes of Buffalo Bill wearing a nipple belt, I do remember him doing this. Next up, we have arguably one of the most influential horror movies of all time.
Directed by Alfred Hitchcock and starring Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh, Psycho is based on the 1959 novel of the same name by Robert Bloch. It centers on a hotel check-in gone wrong after the most unlikely crook in history has a bad encounter with a mama's boy turned motel proprietor who goes from shy to murderously outgoing in the blink of an eye. The film initially divided critics due to its controversial subject matter. Remember, this is 1960 we're talking about. Although slapping and beating your wife on film was encouraged, stabbing her more times than a sex offender in prison was frowned upon. But critics be damned. It set a new level of acceptability for violence, deviant behavior, and sexuality in American films, and is often ranked among the greatest films of all time.
Thankfully, we don't have to look at that disturbing list again to talk about Gein's influence on Psycho. When police raided the farmhouse, the place was an absolute fucking mess. I mean, beyond hoarders level mess here. except for one room. Behind a boarded-up door was Gein's mother's perfectly preserved bedroom, untouched from the day she died in 1945. Gein's mother was known as extremely domineering.
Boy, you have the guts, boy.
Shut up! Shut up!
It's said that soon after his mother's death, Gein began to create a woman suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. Sound familiar? Like all good stories, the character of Norman Bates was definitely embellished and sensationalized significantly in both the novel and especially the Hitchcock film. But damn if those aren't some iconic scenes, right?
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Okay, so that about does it for this episode. Those are just 3 of the most well-known films that were inspired by Ed Gein. There are actually quite a few more floating around out there. If you know of one, drop it down in the comments and let's share some. And, make sure you do me the favor and murder that subscribe button and hit that notification bell, because I've got new killer content dropping all the time.